What happens when the people entrusted with power start acting like the rules no longer apply to them? That's the question at the center of this hearing, and it's why so many people are paying attention. This wasn't just another tense exchange in Washington. It was a public moment where serious concerns about conduct, legality, and responsibility were put on full display, and the discomfort in the room said more than any talking point ever could. If you care about moments where power is actually challenged, make sure you subscribe. At the heart of this issue is accountability, or more accurately, the lack of it. The hearing exposed how officials can allegedly push boundaries, mistreat people, and operate in legal gray areas while facing little to no real consequences. When lawmakers asked direct questions, the answers dodged responsibility rather than addressing the substance of the concerns. That pattern matters because it reveals how normalized this behavior has become. If you want more clear breakdowns of moments like this, subscribe.
This is Congressman Dan Goldman absolutely destroying Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem in a congressional hearing. And what you're about to see is one of the most brutal takedowns of a Trump cabinet official we've seen so far.
Secretary Noem, let's talk about the law. Do you agree that asylum is a lawful pathway to immigrate to this country? Yes or no?
There's an asylum program, yes, in place.
All right. So immigrants then with ongoing asylum applications are legally in this country, correct?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Your question was?
Immigrants with ongoing asylum applications are legally in this country.
There are individuals in this country that have applications that...
And they are legally here because it's a lawful pathway, right?
It's a lawful pathway.
Okay. So if your department then deports anyone with an ongoing asylum application, you are violating the law, correct?
Joe Biden left us with...
I'm not asking about Joe Biden. I'm asking you a specific question. If your department deports anyone with an ongoing asylum application, you are violating the law. Is that correct?
It was greatly violated when they allowed
I'm asking you.
people to come
I'm
in
asking
and
you.
granted asylum applications.
Why are you filibustering? Why can't you answer the question? It's a simple question.
Your president,
if your department
your secretary
deports
did not follow the
anyone
law,
with an ongoing asylum application, you are violating the law. Isn't that correct?
The asylum program was broken under the last...
Mr. Chairman, I will reclaim my time. She's not answering the question. But the obvious answer is that, yes, if you follow a lawful pathway, asylum is a lawful pathway. If you have an open asylum case, you are here lawfully. But the problem that we are seeing around the country is that you are not following the law. Don't tell us to change the law. If you don't like the asylum system, you change the asylum law. Bring it to us. We'll work with you. I think it needs to be changed. But you can't just decide that you're not going to follow the law, and asylum is a law, and deport people who have ongoing applications.
Goldman catches Noem in lie after lie, forces her to admit that her department is breaking the law, and exposes how she personally reinstated an abusive ICE officer just 3 days after promising he'd be investigated. This is the kind of accountability we need to see more of, and it shows exactly why Noem is one of the most dangerous people in Trump's administration right now.
Unfortunately, that is exactly what's happening. It's happening across the street from my office right in New York City. Numerous, thousands of people who have come to court appearances, have left them with open asylum applications, have been arrested. And then they've been shipped off and many deported. In September, one applicant was ripped away from his wife and small children after such a court appearance. And then this happened to his wife. Please play the video.
Hey, yo. I'm yours. Oh, come on, man.
Now, after this incident, your department issued a statement that said the officer's conduct in this video is unacceptable and beneath the men and women of ICE. Our ICE law enforcement are held to the highest professional standards, and this officer is being relieved of current duties as we conduct a full investigation. 3 days later, you reinstated that officer and you put him back on duty. I sent you a letter and asked you what investigation was done and why was he reinstated. You did not answer that letter. So I'm going to give you an opportunity right here to explain to me that if that officer's conduct was, quote, beneath the men and women of ICE, unquote, why did you reinstate him?
This is an ICE officer shoving a woman, a mother whose husband was just taken from her, pushing her so hard she nearly falls. This is how ICE treats people under Kristi Noem's leadership. And after this video came out, after it went viral and people were outraged, Noem's department issued a statement. Goldman reads it directly. The officer's conduct in this video is unacceptable and beneath the men and women of ICE. Our ICE law enforcement are held to the highest professional standards, and this officer is being relieved of current duties as we conduct a full investigation. Sounds good, right? Sounds like accountability. Like they're actually going to do something about an officer who assaulted a woman on camera. But here's the kicker. 3 days later, Noem reinstated that officer and put him back on duty. 3 days. The statement said they were going to conduct a full investigation. 3 days later, the investigation was apparently done, and the officer who they said was acting beneath the standards of ICE was back on the job like nothing happened. Goldman sent Noem a letter asking what investigation was done and why the officer was reinstated. She never responded. So he's giving her an opportunity right there in the hearing to explain.
Sir, that investigation was completed. I can give you that investigation and the information that you would like. This is
Well, I wrote you 2 months ago. Why haven't you given it to me yet?
I'm actually surprised that you haven't gotten it. I'm going to ask my staff about that.
Well, you shouldn't be surprised because generally speaking,
hundreds
you do
and
not
hundreds,
respond
if not
to
thousands
us.
of your letters.
Now, the other problem that we are
Mayorkas, when he had
seeing
this
all
job,
over
didn't
the
respond to
country
letters for years.
is that your officers are wearing masks, are dressed in plain clothes, often going around without identification.
All of our officers are identified.
I'm not asking a question. I introduced the No Secret Police Act to stop this. And we now have 113 co-sponsors so that they will not be masked and that they will identify themselves. Now, you say all of them are identifying themselves. That is not the case because last month in New York City again, the NYPD officers were injured by your masked, plainclothes ICE officers after they were called from 911 as residents witnessed your officers pulling individuals out of their vehicles and chasing them down the street. I also asked you what happened there. How were the NYPD officers injured by your officers? And you didn't respond. What's the answer?
Sir, our individual
Gentlemen's
officers
time
are
is
identified.
time has expired.
She says that investigation was completed and she can give him that investigation and the information he would like. So Goldman asked the obvious question. I wrote you 2 months ago. Why haven't you given it to me yet? And Noem says she's actually surprised that he hasn't gotten it and she's going to ask her staff about that. Goldman fires back, well, you shouldn't be surprised because generally speaking, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of letters go unanswered. Let me explain what's happening here. Noem put out a public statement saying this officer's conduct was unacceptable. She said he was being relieved of duties pending a full investigation. That was clearly damage control. That was her trying to calm down public outrage after the video went viral. But 3 days later, she quietly reinstated him. No announcement, no explanation, just put him back on duty. And when a member of Congress asks what investigation was done in 3 days that justified reinstating an officer who assaulted a woman on camera, she ignores the letter for 2 months. And when confronted about it in a hearing, she acts surprised and promises to look into why she didn't respond. This is how the Trump administration operates. Make a big public statement about accountability when you get caught, then quietly do the opposite and hope nobody follows up. And when someone like Dan Goldman does follow up, stonewall them for months and act confused when called out about it. But Goldman isn't done. He moves on to another massive problem with how ICE operates under Noem. Your officers are wearing masks, are dressed in plain clothes, often going around without identification. And before you can even finish, Noem interrupts. All of our officers are identified, just a flat denial. But Goldman isn't asking a question, he's making a statement. He says, I introduced the No Secret Police Act to stop this, and we now have 113 co-sponsors so that they will not be masked and that they will identify themselves. Now think about that for a second. We need legislation called the No Secret Police Act to force federal agents to identify themselves. That's where we are. That's Trump's America. Federal agents operating like a secret police force with masks and plain clothes and no identification, grabbing people off the streets, and we need an act of Congress to make them identify themselves, like law enforcement is supposed to do in a democracy. Goldman continues, now you say all of them are identifying themselves. That is not the case. And he gives a specific example. Last month in New York City, NYPD officers were injured by your masked, plainclothed ICE officers after they were called by 911 as residents witnessed your officers pulling individuals out of their vehicles and chasing them down the street. So ICE agents were operating with masks and plain clothes, pulling people out of cars and chasing them down the street in New York City. Residents thought they were witnessing a crime or a kidnapping, so they called 911, NYPD showed up, and ICE officers ended up injuring NYPD officers. Let that sink in. ICE agents were operating so secretively and aggressively that regular citizens called the police on them. And when actual police showed up, ICE injured them. These are supposed to be federal law enforcement officers, but they're operating like a criminal gang. And Goldman asked Noem what happened. How are the NYPD officers injured by your officers? And once again, she didn't respond. So in this one hearing, Goldman exposed that Kristi Noem's ICE is deporting people with legal asylum applications in direct violation of the law, that she personally reinstated an abusive officer 3 days after promising he'd be investigated, that she ignores congressional oversight letters for months, and that her officers operate in masks and plain clothes without identification to the point where they're injuring local police officers. That's 4 major scandals in one 5-minute exchange. And you know what the most frustrating part is? Nothing is going to happen to her. She's not going to face any consequences. The officer who assaulted that woman is still on duty. The agents who injured NYPD officers are still out there. The deportations of people with legal asylum cases are still happening, because this is how Trump's government works. They break the law openly, they ignore congressional oversight, and they face zero accountability because Republicans control Congress and they don't care. But here's why this hearing matters anyway. It creates a record. Goldman got Noem to essentially admit through her non-answers that her department is breaking the law. He got her to admit she reinstated an abusive officer with no real investigation. He documented the masked agents injuring police officers. And when Democrats take back power, when there's actual accountability again, this record will be there. These admissions will be there. This evidence will be there. And more importantly, the American people need to see this. They need to see their elected officials like Dan Goldman actually doing their jobs, actually asking tough questions, actually holding these people accountable, even when it doesn't result in immediate consequences. Because the alternative is just accepting that this is normal, accepting that federal agents can break the law, assault people on camera, operate like a secret police force, and face no consequences at all. The reason Republicans are so scared of people like Dan Goldman is because he doesn't play their game. He doesn't accept their talking points. He doesn't let them filibuster and dodge questions. He pins them down, he makes them answer, and when they refuse, he makes it clear to everyone watching exactly what they're hiding. That's what happened here. Noem tried every trick in the book to avoid answering Goldman's questions. She tried to blame Biden. She tried to change the subject. She tried to filibuster. And Goldman shut it all down and made her look like exactly what she is. Someone who's in way over her head, running a department that's breaking the law and abusing people with zero accountability. If you want to see more breakdowns of moments like this, where Trump officials get held accountable, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about Kristi Noem and whether you believe she should resign after this disaster of a hearing.
What stood out to me most was not just what was said, but what wasn't. There was no real ownership of mistakes, no acknowledgement of harm, and no urgency to correct course. Instead, the tone suggested that this is just how things are done now. That should worry anyone who believes public service is supposed to serve the public, not shield officials from scrutiny. If this kind of analysis matters to you, subscribe. In my view, when someone in a powerful position can't give straight answers during a hearing like this, it raises serious questions about whether they're fit to remain in that role. Accountability isn't optional, and resignation shouldn't be treated as a radical idea when trust has been so visibly damaged. Leadership requires transparency, and this moment showed a clear failure to meet that standard. For more honest commentary like this, subscribe. Situations like this hearing are exactly why public oversight exists. They remind us that democracy doesn't run on loyalty to individuals, but on consequences for actions. Whether you agree with me or not, these moments deserve careful attention, not blind defense or partisan excuses. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to keep seeing deep dives like this, subscribe.